Welcome to OBM Unscripted, where the systems get sassy, tech tantrums are tamed, and real talk rules the mic.
We're your hosts. I'm Christy Beard, your go-to strategist and business coach.
I'm Muneeba Brooks, your operations and tech whisperer.
And I'm Layna May, the guru of systems and workflow magic.
We're all accredited OBMs, and we have seen it all.
If you've ever wanted to scream into a client brief, cry over Zapier, or Google, "Can I invoice for emotional labor?" you're in the right place.
This is your space for behind-the-scenes stories, hot takes, and community vibes for OBMs, VAs, and online service bosses.
Real talk, real answers.
Unfiltered,
Unscripted.
Hey everybody, welcome back to OBM Unscripted. We're happy to have you here. Today we're talking about OBM pricing. Do you have an hourly package? Do you have a retainer package? Do you do a per project package? Which one actually pays you what you're worth? So we're going to break down some of these topics today and talk about how that applies in our own businesses. I want to start with Christy today because Christy had quite the evolution in packages.
It's more of a result pricing, I think, more on like the projects in line with projects. I think the evolution came because I wanted to help everybody, but I've quickly realized that not everyone could afford my rate. And so most people they're more interested in the result. And so it just made sense to make it more of a project-based pricing instead of an hourly rate. That way I don't have to time myself. I don't have to worry about keeping track of timesheets, anything like that. It's more of a scope project. And so I knew what I needed to do within that scope and what that rate would be. So I just figured out how long in general, what it would take for me to complete the scope of that project. And then I did my rate based on that.
Let's kind of hone in on the hourly rate because I feel like as OBMs, we can pitch an hourly rate, which may be a lot higher because that's what the client is familiar with. I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars to do data entry or to do this, which is what I hear mostly as a VA versus an OBM. Muneeba, talk a little bit about the hourly rate as an OBM.
Initially, starting out as a VA, I very much had that VA rate and maybe hopping to something like $35 an hour was like, oh my gosh, is anyone going to pay that? But then as you get more comfortable in your role and what you can deliver, what you can offer, you're getting feedback from clients saying that, oh, this is really good. Then you start feeling confident enough to try charging more. So then the rate gets higher. So maybe now it's $45, maybe it's $50, maybe it's $75, maybe it's $90. It's just been an evolution because it really was about the type of client I was getting. So initially whether I knew it or not, I was getting clients who were maybe wanting more VA services as opposed to OBM services. So in their mind, they've already price anchored it to like a certain dollar amount, where if you quote anything higher, well, that's pretty high for what you're offering, isn't it? And again, in their mind, they haven't really become familiar with the concept of an OBM. So in turn, I started to learn that that's not my ideal client. I need to really go back and refine my client profile and client persona. Who am I targeting? What is their monthly revenue and what can they afford going forward? What are they looking for? What is going on in their mind or in their lives when they're seeking an OBM to come in and support their business? And then I started pricing accordingly. And even that, like for a strategy package, I had quoted a price, which was the highest I had ever quoted anyone before. And even that, I got the right client. And that client was like, that's it? I was like, oh, well, for you, yeah, I guess. But then I had to go back to the drawing board. And I'm like, okay, now this is my ideal client persona. And they're looking at this as cheap. Okay, got it. I've got some work to do. And then I go back to the drawing board and then, refine the pricing again. So It's been a tricky evolution for me. Like, I don't have a straightforward answer on pricing. Am I charging more as an OBM than I did as a VA? Absolutely. It's been a good evolution in that sense, and finance wise, but I can't say that I have it figured out, to be honest.
I
Yeah,
think
and it kind of leads me back to Christy, where she charges for the result in her business. I charge in my business for the solution to the problem. So it's similar to Christie's as a result, but it's the same thing over and over. It's not necessarily completely individualized. I'm plugging them into a system I know already works. And that solution has taken 20 years for me following and doing on my own to get to that solution. So I can say, yes, if you follow this, absolutely, you will make X amount of dollars. And here's how we're going to do it. I'm still kind of fluid in my rate because sometimes people just want to dip their toe into what you can do for them. So I may give a discounted rate to give them my wow factor. And I will do this for this amount of time at this amount of money for X amount. And then after that, if you want another project, if you are wowed, my rate is this or my retainer is this. So I still kind of ebb and flow depending on the client.
Yeah, I think another thing to consider when you're doing hourly, which is something that I fell into, is the more you do it, the faster you get, and then the less you earn because you do it faster, which is backwards. And so I don't like to track time because I do work fast. And the faster I get something done, that just means that if I'm working 5 or 6 or 10 hours for a client and I've been doing it for a while and now it only takes me half the time. Now I'm sitting here, okay, now what can I do for you? Or they want to add to the tasks, even though it's still considered a full plate, but I'm doing it faster than I did maybe when I first started. And I think that was one of the downsides for me on continuing with the hourly rate.
a, a lot of OBMs go on this retainer kind of price structure. And I think it's great because it says you're not your time, you're not your task, you are the presence in the business that are getting things done for the business owner. And the good news about retainers is that it's predictable income. So if you can sell enough of them, you've got your predictable income. Keeping within the pricing strategies, what do you think as an OBM starting out would benefit most from the hourly, the retainer, or I don't even know what we're calling it, scoped pricing?
Scope-based pricing or package pricing, probably.
Package price, yeah.
Yeah. So it would really depend on the client. And I say that because if you're first starting out and you're still learning who you like to work with, I would recommend hourly because that gives you a chance to get to know the client, get to know the work, get comfortable with it, and then decide if that's the type of client and work that you want to do. Once you get comfortable with the work and the client, then I would say you could move into retainer type packages or scope based packages so that because you've done the work, you know how long it's going to take you to do it. And so you should be able to price out a package under that specific scope and be pretty close to not going over on your hours. So I think it kind of falls under, it depends on you and what you want to do. Some people may want to do retainers, but there's a lot of different ways you can set up retainers. You can do it under scope for X amount a month or X amount per project. Well, if it's a retainer, it's probably long term. And so you can do it either hourly or scope. So yeah, just kind of for me, it would depend. I would have to reevaluate what I wanted and what type of clients I wanted to work with when I set stuff up.
I'm going to disagree on that because coming from a VA background where you were paid hourly, essentially, I absolutely hated charging an hourly rate because I hated the fact that I could get things done faster. And I hated the fact that because of my experience, I didn't have a learning curve that I had to go through. And I actually still see this right now that I have VAs that I work with within my agency and I delegate projects. We're talking about each other's workload and capacity, and okay, this project needs this needs this. I had a situation come up where, a client needed some tweaks to their website. They wanted to stand up a few new product pages, so we had to write the content, revise the design and whatever. And I talked to a number of VAs and they're like, well, yeah, that's probably like a 5-hour job. And that's a 10-hour job. And everybody had a different gauge of how long it would take them. At the end, I opted to do it myself. It took me 45 minutes. And I think that was the most frustrating thing for me, is because I have a grasp on the work itself and I could pay someone else to do it, but it's going to take them longer. And at the end, sometimes if I could just do it myself, I'll do it myself. I didn't feel like I was getting fairly compensated for the value I bring. I was getting paid for how much time I'm putting into the client. So if anyone is moving from the VA space to an OBM, I would never say do hourly, because you're going to find yourself in that pickle where you're so used to being, charging hourly, but you're already operating at a higher level. So that's when you kind of, in my opinion, you should factor in the experience and the value you bring. If you do choose to stay with an hourly model, then that bumps your rate higher. But again, value-based pricing to me was super helpful. But again, I still feel like I haven't really grasped the value, because even though I think that if I charge, X amount of dollars for a strategy session and a client is giving me feedback, well, that's cheap. Well, that means I need to charge more, because now I'm hitting my ideal client, but they're still viewing that as a discount. Okay, well, I'm going to up my rates then. And I'm going to keep growing and learning as I go to get this right. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky thing. You kind of have to do what works for you.
I do agree. That's why I don't do hourly, is I work too fast. But some people starting out, they'll have to figure out what works well for them and what they're comfortable with. But I will say, sometimes working hourly, it undervalues our value, what we bring to the table, our strategy, and our ability to solve problems quickly for our clients. And that is a big problem for hourly, which is why I guess I stem more toward the scope-based result type of pricing.
When I came in as an OBM as well, I was so used to either an hourly rate or a salary, so to speak, which is essentially a retainer. It was difficult for me to start raising my rates, knowing that I could do what I was doing just like you, in half the time, a quarter of a time. It felt weird. It felt like I was ripping people off in the beginning. So I literally had to change my mindset to, you can charge more because you've got all the experience doing it. Who else is going to do it the way you do it, your value add, at this price? And so after the first 2 or 3 clients on retainer where I was getting really good feedback, I was saying, you know what? I'm not charging enough for this retainer. And now I can also say with certainty that I'm doing what I'm doing. That was my experience in my business. Christy, you've got an interesting model because you're package based. So, going through all the different versions of your business that you've been through, how did you land on a package versus a retainer?
Well, and it's even evolved since then. I'm doing membership now, but I think it evolved because I want to be able to help as many people as I possibly can. And I have a very specific focus on what I help people in. And I think it just went so with the package, it was more of a value-based delivery. I was delivering a specific outcome that the client was looking for. And so that's why I pivoted more toward the project pricing and the scope pricing, because I work too fast. And when I'm done, I don't want to have to go back to the client and say, okay, I'm all done. Now what can I do? Because that doesn't send a really good message. It could say, wow, she's really good, but it also could make the client think, well, what am I paying for if she got it done that fast? Is it really worth what I just paid? And keeping those things in mind when I was coming up with my pricing, it just made more sense to do more of a results-based pricing rather than a time base or a retainer. I mean, even retainers, you can make those based on deliverables. It doesn't have to be based on like a specific time of a scope of time. It just felt, for what I was trying to do for my clients, it just felt like the right thing to do.
Muneeba, I know your sweet spot with your business is really retainers, retainers for team management, project oversight, ops support. When you price out a retainer, now that you're an agency, what do you take into consideration if you're gonna charge the retainer and do it yourself, or charge the retainer and hand it off to a VA?
Depends on the kind of work, to be honest. So I do have one structured package, which is the initial strategy session. I have a fixed fee for that. And depending on the outcome of that strategy session, because the deliverable that I end up giving is a full-on end-to-end report on current state of the business, proposed state of the business, recommendations on how to get you there, and a 90-day work plan. Business owners can use that deliverable itself as a blueprint and take it and do it themselves because it's that cohesive. Or I offer a done with you model where they've got team members that can go ahead and execute on the strategy, but they may need check-in or a bit of guidance, a bit of team management. So then I'll charge a flat fee for that monthly, or a done for you model where now I have to bring my team in and come and implement this thing. So again, it really depends on what that looks like. Sometimes it's a short-term project where it's just like a custom software implementation. I bring my team in, I look at how much is it going to cost for me to bring on an expert to do this implementation. I charge based on how much work needs to get put in, what the timeline is. So there's quite a few factors that I eventually look at when I come up with a final pricing, and that'll be like a short-term retainer. If it's an ongoing retainer, then I look at the level of work that needs to be put in. So is it checking emails, making sure calendars are all talking to each other properly? Is it light admin? Is it expense management? What is it? And that's something I can bring in a VA to go ahead and handle. So to be honest, a lot of the pricing goes directly to the VAs that I work with. I don't take a large cut on top of it because I was on the receiving end of it, and that's just my own pricing philosophy. I'd rather the VA take the lion's share of the retainer, and, mine is like very minimal, like maybe not even 5%. Like it's very, very minimal. But I think I'm coming more from a principle-based pricing model, you could say, not
Yes.
necessarily profit-based, where I feel very strongly about making sure people are compensated for the work that they do. And I'm not taking a lot of this share of the money, which they should be getting because they're doing the work, they're doing the day-to-day grind. So that's more of a philosophical difference that I have when it comes to pricing and paying VAs that I work with. But again, it depends. Like I said, if it's higher level AI implementation, where now we've got to, pull in some integrations and what have you, that pay is higher on top of it. But again, depending on how much involvement I need to have within that retainer, I kind of take that into account. If I'm putting hours into the project, I'll charge a rate based on what my involvement would be. And then I factor in what the partner will come in and go ahead and implement as well. And then that becomes the pricing. There's a lot of factors, to be honest, when I eventually end up with a quote or a scope that I give to the clients.
I do a done with you and done for you model, just like you do. When I start a project, if I'm not familiar with the client, it's a 90-day project right out the gate because we could learn 2 weeks in that we're going to butt heads this entire project, or the client's going to need a lot of hand holding because they're not understanding the back end or they've got shiny object syndrome. So all these factors come into play in that first 90 days. It's very rare I will have somebody just hand off and say, just go do what you do best in that 90-day time frame. Usually the 90-day packages are a little higher too, because I don't know if they're going to be a pain in the behind or not. If it evolves and I want to continue on with that client, then those packages get longer. It could be a year-long package or a 6-month retainer package where they've been given a discount for being longer because I've been introduced to the business. I know how they work. I can work with them. They can work with me, and things are a lot easier. I know this has been a very kind of out there conversation for pricing for OBMs, and they're probably more confused than when we started, because we were when we originally started as well. So if anybody has any questions or you want to know more about any of our pricing plans, reach out to us on LinkedIn or in our Facebook groups, and we're happy to talk to you about pricing strategy. So we will see you guys next week, and like, share, and follow for more tips and tricks on OBMs. Bye, y'all.